Hello. Nobody expected what happened when Matt Gaetz tried to corner Morgan Freeman during a televised congressional hearing. What started as a routine oversight meeting on federal ethics turned into a moment America couldn't stop talking about. The air in the chamber was tense. Not the usual political theater kind of tension, but the heavy stillness that comes before a storm. The room was packed. Staffers lined the walls. Reporters had their cameras ready. What most assumed would be another round of performative soundbites turned into something else entirely. At one end of the committee table sat Matt Gaetz. Polished, smug, and clearly enjoying the spotlight. A man who had built his brand on controversy, social media barbs, and late-night cable news battles. Directly across from him sat Morgan Freeman. Not as an actor, not as a celebrity, but as the founder of a nonprofit pushing for transparency in sentencing, equitable access to legal counsel, and post-incarceration rehabilitation. He wasn't there to promote a movie. He wasn't there for attention. He came to speak for people who rarely got a seat in that room. But Gaetz wasn't having it. He leaned into the mic, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. More performance than sincerity. Then, with a voice drenched in sarcasm, he fired the first shot. Well, Mr. Freeman, it's always refreshing to get legal advice from someone whose qualifications involve narrating Penguin documentaries. A few aides chuckled under their breath. One staffer blinked twice, unsure of what he'd just heard. Freeman didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even look rattled. But Gaetz pushed forward, sensing an opportunity to own the moment. I mean, you're here to talk about justice, he continued, casually flipping through a binder. But let's be honest. Your resume includes more red carpets than courtrooms. Forgive me if I find it hard to take political advice from someone who plays presidents on screen but never sat through a deposition. The insult wasn't even subtle. It was crafted to provoke, to diminish, to strip away legitimacy by reducing Freeman to a caricature. A voice, a face, not a force. He gestured theatrically with his hand. I'm just wondering, Mr. Freeman, how many hours you logged studying constitutional law between filming shampoo commercials? It was smug, calculated, and absolutely intentional. The cameras caught it all. So did the nation. And still, Morgan didn't flinch. He let the silence breathe. He let the insult land and linger. Then, with calm precision, he leaned toward the mic and spoke in a voice that needed no volume to command the room. Congressman, he said, folding his hands, I may not have a law degree, but I've spent my life studying something far more important than legal jargon. He paused. I've studied people. And just like that, the tone of the hearing changed. The moment Morgan Freeman spoke, something shifted in the room. Not dramatically, not with a flourish, but with weight. The truth is, he continued, his voice steady as stone, I've sat across from young men who never stood a chance. I've visited prisons where hope doesn't exist. I've watched families fall apart because justice, for them, was just a word on paper. His eyes locked on Gaetz, not with anger, but with clarity. You want to talk credentials? Let's talk impact. He leaned forward, slowly. While you were busy tweeting during hearings, I was working with former inmates struggling to re-enter society. While you filmed TikToks to own the libs, I was helping a father in Ohio who'd served 12 years for a nonviolent drug charge, while a hedge fund executive walked free after laundering millions. A ripple moved through the chamber. No one was laughing now, but Gaetz, unwilling to cede ground, tightened his jaw and shot back. Well, Mr. Freeman, he said, sarcasm hardening into condescension. I'm sure your dramatic monologues play well in documentaries, but this is Congress. We make real policy here. He flipped open a thick manila folder like it was a weapon. And let's not pretend you're just some innocent advocate, he said. Your foundation has taken money from progressive donors. You've called for the elimination of mandatory minimums. You even called the U.S. prison system a modern plantation. So forgive me if I question whether your intentions are entirely apolitical. He threw down a printed headline. Freeman calls America's justice system a business built on bodies. That's your quote, isn't it? Freeman nodded, unfazed. Yes, and I stand by it. His voice was low, almost gentle, but the force behind the words was unmistakable. I didn't say that out of hatred. I said it because I've seen what happens when punishment becomes profitable. When we invest more in prisons than we do in schools. When zip codes determine whether a child ends up in a dorm room or a jail cell. He paused, letting that sink in. That's not justice. That's exploitation. Gates glanced toward the panel, hoping for backup, but found only silence. Morgan Freeman wasn't giving a performance. He was issuing a reality check. And the room felt it. I didn't come here to debate partisan talking points, Freeman said. I came here to talk about the cost of our indifference. He folded his hands once again, voice calm but unwavering. Because when people like you reduce this work to theater, you're not mocking me, you're mocking the lives of every man and woman who's been failed by the system you claim to represent. Gates shifted in his seat. That self-assured smirk he wore so easily was beginning to falter. He glanced at the cameras, then at the committee members, but their expressions offered no comfort. The mood in the room had changed, and he knew it. So he tried a new angle. You talk a good game, Mr. Freeman, he said, louder now. But if you're going to lecture this body on fairness, maybe you should address the kind of people your nonprofit defends, repeat offenders, drug dealers, felons. He raised a printed case summary like a trophy. Here's one of your justice warriors. Convicted twice for armed robbery. You featured him in a PSA about second chances. Tell me, how many more second chances do criminals get before law-abiding citizens get theirs? A few heads turned. A couple murmurs. Gates leaned in, sensing momentum. But Freeman didn't budge. His voice came slower this time, more deliberate. I remember that man, he said. His name was Darius. He was 17 when he committed that first robbery. He was homeless. No father. No guidance. Just survival. Gates opened his mouth, but Freeman raised a hand, not rudely, just firmly. And he served his time. Twice. Came out with nothing but a bus pass and a record that blocked him from housing, jobs, and school. He came to our center because no one else would open a door. Freeman's eyes locked onto Gates with a calm intensity that silenced the room again. Maybe you see a criminal, Congressman. I saw a human being. I saw potential. And I stood with him not because I excused what he did, but because I refused to define him by the worst moment of his life. There it was. A quiet line that carried more power than 100 shouting matches. Matt Gates blinked. Paused. Searched for something, anything to fire back. Then he found it. You want to talk second chances? He asked, sitting forward. Tell me this, Mr. Freeman. Do victims get a second chance? Do families you never met get closure while you hand out compassion to criminals? Freeman didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned slightly, not just to Gates, but to the gallery, the interns, the aides, the country watching. Justice isn't a choice between compassion and accountability, he said. It's the balance of both. And when you strip away either side, you don't get law and order, you get chaos wrapped in legislation. Another pause. Then, even quieter. If we believe people can never be redeemed, then why even pretend to run a justice system? Just call it a punishment machine and be done with it. No one clapped. No one needed to. The words didn't ask for applause. They asked for reflection. Matt Gates clenched his jaw. He was used to controlling the room with sharp comebacks and viral zingers. But this wasn't a college debate or a late-night news clip. Freeman wasn't playing along. And worse, the audience wasn't laughing. So Gates tried to reframe the entire exchange. Well, Mr. Freeman, he said, his voice now carrying a trace of forced composure, you speak about justice like it's poetry. But this committee deals with facts. Real legislation. Real oversight. Not philosophies written on napkins in Hollywood. He leaned back, smugness attempting a comeback. So since you're so committed to change, let's see what you actually know. Can you explain to this body the constitutional implications of Chevron deference in the context of judicial overreach? Or is that above your pay grade? A few brows lifted. A classic ambush, drop a dense legal term, hope for a stumble. Freeman didn't even blink. He took a breath, almost smiling. You're referring, he said slowly, to the principle that courts often defer to administrative agencies in interpreting ambiguous laws, a doctrine that's been used and abused depending on who benefits. Gates sat upright, visibly surprised. But here's the part you don't say out loud, Freeman added. Chevron deference was designed for efficiency, not evasion. It becomes dangerous when used as a shield for corruption or deregulation. When power is handed to agencies without oversight, you don't get justice, you get loopholes. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just clarity. And if you actually listen to the voices I represent, Freeman said, turning toward the panel now, you'd know those loopholes aren't just legal, they're lived. When a housing rule gets rewritten by an unelected board, it's not an academic issue. It means a single mom in Baltimore gets evicted over a typo in paperwork she never saw. Silence. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was intentional. People were listening. Gates looked rattled now. His stack of printed notes lay untouched. He started to reach for another file, then thought better of it. Morgan Freeman's words weren't just resonating. They were landing. I came here today, Freeman said, not because I wanted a headline, but because I believe this system still has a soul buried under all the talking points, behind all the red tape. He paused, then added, and I'm here to ask whether any of you still believe that too. The chairman cleared his throat, but no gavel could cut through the hush that settled across the hearing room. Every phone was poised in midair, every reporter half forgotten behind glowing lenses. Matt Gaetz inhaled, squared his shoulders, and went for the final swing. Mr. Freeman, he said, pitching his voice so it carried to the rafters, you paint a noble picture, but you neglect reality. Crime statistics are rising in many of the very cities that adopted the reforms you champion. Isn't it true that your compassionate policies cost lives? He lifted a glossy chart, red arrows, bold fonts, fear distilled onto cardstock. Numbers don't lie, he declared. Morgan Freeman regarded the placard, then looked past it, straight into Gaetz's eyes. Numbers don't lie, he repeated, but they rarely tell the whole story. He tapped the desk once, soft, yet it echoed. Those spikes you're holding? Most are concentrated in neighborhoods that lost after-school programs, mental health clinics, and union jobs long before anyone whispered the word reform. We slashed ladders, then wondered why people couldn't climb. A murmur rippled through the gallery, recognition more than surprise. Freeman continued, voice low, diction precise. Accountability without opportunity is a pressure cooker. It punishes symptoms, not causes. You want safer streets? Fund schools like we fund prisons. Make healthcare as accessible as handcuffs. Treat addiction in hospitals, not holding cells. He let the room breathe, then delivered the line that would replay on every feed that night. Justice isn't soft on crime, it's hard on the reasons crime exists. Gaetz opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The comeback wasn't there. His pages suddenly felt thin, his graphics flimsy. Across the dais, a senior committee member who earlier had scrolled idly through emails set her tablet down and leaned forward, listening now. Freeman took one last glance around the chamber. I am not here to embarrass anyone, he said, tone gentle but immovable. I'm here to remind us that the measure of a nation isn't how loud its punishments are, but how fair its chances are. He looked to Gaetz, no malice, just certainty. And if that sounds naive, Congressman, perhaps we've grown too cynical to remember why these seats were built in a semicircle, conversation, not conquest. Silence deepened, then broke, first in a single, tentative clap from the visitors' gallery, followed by another, until the room swelled with applause that protocol couldn't restrain. Reporters glanced at one another, unsure whether to keep typing or to stand. Gaetz lowered the chart. His shoulders slumped, the practiced grin gone. He reached for his water, but even the motion looked uncertain, as though his hands no longer trusted the script. Morgan Freeman simply folded his notes, 3 pages, well-worn, and slid them into a leather folder. No victory pose, no flourish. Just a man gathering his things after saying what needed saying. And in that moment, the hearing transformed from political spectacle to moral reckoning, broadcast to millions, archived in real time, destined to become the clip students study when they ask how one voice, steady and unembellished, can shift the gravity of an entire room. The applause eventually faded, but the silence that followed felt even louder. Matt Gaetz sat still, trying to regain his footing. His staffers avoided eye contact. The smug assurance he carried into the hearing had evaporated, replaced by a kind of blank calculation, searching for an exit strategy, a pivot, anything. The chairman cleared his throat again. Mr. Freeman, we appreciate your testimony, he said, voice neutral but respectful. It was the political version of surrender. But Freeman wasn't quite done. He leaned forward one last time, voice low but carrying a final truth. There will be headlines about this exchange, he said. Clips will go viral. You'll see reactions, memes spin. He looked directly at the press section now. But don't let that become the story. The story is not me. It's not this committee. It's the single mother in Atlanta working 3 jobs to keep her son out of trouble. It's the young man in Chicago who's afraid to walk to school because both sides of the block are a battlefield. It's the veteran in Fresno who sleeps in a shelter after serving 2 tours overseas. He paused. If this building can't hear them, then I don't care how many microphones we've got. We failed. Freeman's tone was even, not accusing. but it landed like a verdict. And Gates? Still silent. Still watching. Still shrinking. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That's what leadership sounds like." No one corrected them. Morgan Freeman stood slowly, gathering his folder and pen. A simple gesture, but after everything he'd said, it felt almost ceremonial. As he turned to leave, he looked back just once, this time not to Gates, but to the young interns in the back row, the ones who hadn't spoken all day but hadn't taken their eyes off him either. "Never forget," he said quietly, "truth doesn't need volume. It needs consistency." And with that, he walked out. No entourage. No reporters swarming. Just a long, steady walk down the marble corridor. Inside the chamber, the members sat frozen, unsure what to say, as if anything they uttered now would just echo the wrong way. Gates looked down at his prepared rebuttal. Then he folded it. Not because he agreed, but because he knew in that moment no one was listening to him anymore. Outside, cameras waited for a statement from Freeman. He gave them none. Because he didn't need to. The story had already been written, etched into the silence of that room, imprinted on every viewer who had witnessed the impossible. That sometimes a calm voice doesn't just win an argument. It changes the entire conversation. Bye-bye.